Hello and welcome to part 2 of my quest to find the perfect Linux laptop. If you don't know what all this is about, then I'd advise you to go and click on the link somewhere above my head to view part 1. As a quick précis, basically I spent a lot of money on a Dell XPS 9560 and this is the part where we get to see what the version of Linux I put on and how it's all sorted out and how I configured it, etc. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and watch the rest of the video. Okay, so we're going to start off part 2 with something that I left off part 1. In part 1, I said quite frequently how expensive it was, how well-built machine it was, and how high-end it was, and failed completely to give you the actual specification of the machine that I bought. On screen in front of you is that spec. I'll talk over it, but you can always pause it and go back if you want to know the minutiae of what I've actually got. This is the spec that Linux reports. It's not what I ordered. Let me give you some recap of what happened. I bought a certified refurb model of the XPS 15 from Dell. I had lots of options in front of me, even though it was a refurb. I could choose RAM and hard drive size. As you can see, I went 32 gig and a terabyte of SSD. But I could also choose not to have options which I thought might save me a little bit. So I chose, when I ordered it, not to have the touchscreen and not to have the fingerprint reader. However, in their infinite wisdom, and I'm not complaining, Dell sent me the full kit and caboodle with the fingerprint reader and the touchscreen for no extra charge. So what I ordered, like I said, is not what I got. This is what I got. This is what Linux reports back. I think the important things are here, as I've already said, 32 gig of RAM, Intel Core i7 7700, 8 cores, 2.8 gig, and the SSD is a terabyte. It has an integrated webcam. It's not brilliant. It's a 720p, I believe. And the battery. The battery is a 97 watt hour battery, which is the biggest you can get. So that was the spec. Now let's get into the actual rest of the review. Okay, so if we're going to now look at the outside of the laptop after about 3 to 4 months of working on it, nothing really has changed that much. I haven't done any polishing up. This is how it was the last time I turned it on. I've bought a case primarily just to protect the top and so I can put my stickers on it. The case comes in 2 parts. There's one for the actual top and one for the bottom, but I found that the one on the bottom actually impedes the opening of the lid. So I've taken that off and I've just left the top one on. I'll put a link to where I bought that case in the notes below this video. Going down from the top, the screen is a touch screen, as I've said before. I don't know whether you can see this, but it does get a certain bit of finger grease on, but not that much actually. Considering it's like a shiny Retina type display, it doesn't have a huge amount of finger grease showing on the display when you use it as a touch screen. I don't use it all that often, but I use it a couple of times in each session. So that's a positive. The bezel is really good, which you'll see later on when I switch it all on, and the display is really good. Still impressed with that. The outside of the keyboard, and it looks like a carbon fiber. I'm not going to say it is carbon fiber. I'm just going to say it's a carbon fiber effect. That is reasonably good at repelling finger grease or finger oil. That's not too bad. The big downside is the touch pad here, and you can probably see it in the video. It picks up finger grease like there is no tomorrow, and it's never a good thing. I don't know what material they used that they've used for this, but it's certainly not, and it may be something to do with the color as well, because the MacBook Pro doesn't pick up anywhere near this finger grease. But it's that silvery color. This is black, and you can see there's this patch in the middle, which no matter how much, and I'll just try and do a bit of polishing, you just can't seem to get rid of it entirely. Or it takes a while to get rid of it entirely. That's much better, but I mean, you're having to do that at least once a session to keep that down. So that's a bad thing. They could have looked at how to repel that finger grease or finger oil a little bit better on the touchpad, being it's going to be in constant use. Everything else is fine. Occasionally I'll wipe the screen with a microfiber lens cloth, but everything else is looking quite good. So have no problems with the outside aesthetics after 4 months of use. So now we're at the stage where we have to talk about the distribution that's going on the XPS. Now I think in part 1 of the review, I kind of inferred that we were going to choose the distribution in part 2. But in fact, I have to say I lied a little bit to the viewing public out there, because I've already chosen what Linux distribution I was going to put on the XPS. And in fact, I always knew all along when I was going to buy this that what I was going to put on was Fedora. Now, some people may say, why did he choose Fedora? But the truth is, I've always been a Red Hat person. The very first distribution I ever used was Red Hat 5.2 back in 1998 or something. And I've used various versions of RHEL since then, and CentOS, and now I'm using Amazon Linux, which is based on a Red Hat upstream. So it seems sensible to stick to something that's an RPM-based system, and Fedora fits that perfectly for me. I also wanted something that was kind of up to date, and again, pretty much every time I boot up Fedora, there are more updates that I have to install. So that's a great thing for me. But hey, you know, choosing a Linux distribution is entirely a personal preference thing. Some people may think I should be using something that's Debian based, or Arch Linux or something like that. But you know, if that's what you want to install, you go ahead. That's your prerogative. I'm sticking with my Red Hat based infrastructure, and Fedora is what I'm using and what I have been using for the past 4 months on this machine. Now, I'm not going to insult your intelligence by doing a whole section on how to install Linux, because if you're considering buying an XPS, a £1,400 to £1,700 laptop, chances are you might have already worked out how to install Linux before. So I'm just going to go straight to Linux installed. So this is a vanilla, freshly installed Fedora 26 desktop, and it's okay, but there are a few things I don't like about it. I don't like the fonts. I don't like the how the icons for the applications come in from the side and are huge, and also everything seems to be the size of a house. Look at the icons for the file manager. It's just so big, and it's not really a desktop for the world of the lovely OS 10, OS X, whatever you want to call it, MacBook Pro world, where everything's nice and smooth and drop shadows and transparencies. So I had to do something about it, and I did some changes, and I hope you like what I did with the place. Okay, so now in front of you, you can see all of the changes I made to the standard vanilla Fedora desktop. There are a lot of things, and for the rest of this video, this is what I'll be taking you through, along with any positive and negative points that I've found over the last 4 months of using it. So we're going to start off with a couple of negative points, it has to be said. They're not insurmountable, but they are there. So the first one is, in previous versions of most Linux distributions, all of the graphical processing has been done using X11, or the implementation Xorg, which is a client-server display protocol, and that's how you get the desktops for most Linux and Unix distributions. Now, They made a change in the later versions of Fedora, 25 and 26. And they're now using Wayland, which is an alternative protocol. And it can still use X11Xorg, but it can use Wayland in preference to everything else. Now, there are a couple of issues, and that if you log on for the very first time to Fedora, you've already created a username and you're logging on. If you use the default Wayland authentication, when you get to the login screen, you'll see an option for logging in via Gnome, or logging in via Gnome Classic, or logging in via Gnome on Xorg. If you choose the top one, which is just Gnome, it tries to use Wayland. And because of Nouveau, which are the open source NVIDIA drivers, it has some problems and it freezes. And you'll also have problems because of Nouveau when you're running things like LSPCI. So the first thing you have to do is do some changes in Grub to get that login. So the way you do that is you log on via Gnome on Xorg, you do the changes, and then from then on you can use the standard Gnome login. Again, the link to my blog, which is in the description, that will show you what changes actually need to be made. I'm not going to go through all those because they're not complicated, but there's a few of them. But once you've done that, you never have to worry about that again. So that's the first thing. Okay, so now I'm going to take you through the second thing that's not great, and that's the battery life. So when this PC came, when this XPS came in its Windows format, battery life was really good. It's easily one of the best, well-managed battery implementations on a laptop, including the MacBook Pro. It beats the MacBook Pro in tests that I've seen in terms of battery life. So I knew that it would be less good using Linux, because Linux battery management isn't great, but I didn't know how bad it was going to be. And bearing in mind that I bought the 97 amp hour, no, that's not what I bought. 97 watt hour is what I bought, not an amp hour. 97 watt hour battery, which is the maximum you can get in one of these machines. So I kind of thought it would be okay. So what I did was, to test this out, I charged the battery up, I went to YouTube, I went onto a long 4-hour 4K video, maximized it on the screen, unplugged the power cable, and then I just timed it to see how long it would play a 4K video until the message came up to say the machine is about to shut down because of battery. And that was 2 hours and 10 minutes. Now, I understand that most people won't be doing that, like watching for that long, although if you're watching a film, I suppose you would be. But for what I'm doing it, how I'm going to use it, that's not an issue. So I guess 2 hours and 10 minutes if you're using it really full on, doing full graphical processing, 4K graphical processing. You could probably add another hour, an hour and a half. So 3 hours, 45 minutes perhaps, if you're doing random tasks. But it's not what this would get if you had Windows. If you had Windows on this, you would be getting 5 hours, something like that. So that's a bit disappointing. Now, there's a few things you can do to help this out. And I'm going to take you through a few of these now. The first thing is Wi-Fi works out of the box, not a problem. But I've switched Wi-Fi off here, and I've got a USB Ethernet adapter, USB-C Thunderbolt 3 Ethernet adapter, so that while I'm at my desk, that's what I use. I don't use Wi-Fi. That saves a little bit. Bluetooth works as well, but I haven't got anything paired to it. So everything that I've got is paired to my phone. So I've got that switched off as well. So you can see that's, we've gone on wired only, we've got Wi-Fi off and Bluetooth is off as well. That helps. What also helps is I've got a little application running called PowerTop, and PowerTop is an application that minimizes power consumption. I'm going to log on here. Don't berate me for using sudo. I've heard it all before. Thank you very much. So PowerTop is a way of managing everything. So there's a way of enabling it, but you can run it like this, and the way of enabling it means that it's running all the time, managing. If you flick through by tabbing across, you can see what's taking the stats, what's taking all of the power. So PCI, USB, display backlights, various things like that. And then there's the tunables. So the idea is that all of these things you have to set to good. You can, I just flicked over them. You can press enter to toggle any of these. And the idea is that they should all be good. Some of them come up bad. I think the best way to show you this is if I take out the Ethernet adapter. So I'll unplug the Ethernet adapter, which I have now. And you can see here, these are flicked to bad now. So the auto suspend for USB and those have come up as bad. The Thunderbolt 3 has come up as bad. If I plug the Ethernet adapter back into the Thunderbolt socket, they've gone into good. That one's still bad, so I can change that to good, and I can change that to good. And that means it's managing the power. There's a couple of more down there that I didn't get. Okay, so but that's how you set them up. And for some reason that one's not going to good. I don't know why that is. USB 3.1. Anyway, that's the principle behind it, and you set that up, and that will manage your power much better than if you don't use it. So that's so to sum up that, you switch off the things you don't need. So like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. Obviously, you need Wi-Fi if you're out in a coffee shop or something using the laptop, but not if you're at a desk. And most of the time, I'm going to use this as like a workstation. Use PowerTop, set it all up, do a discovery, and make sure everything is looking good. And the third thing is one of these little Gnome widgets, which is a power management, a CPU selection. It's called CPU power management, and it allows you to flick through profiles to set your CPU up. So if you were out on the road and you weren't plugged into the power, my advice is to switch it to something like the energy saver mode, which means that the frequency and the minimum and the maximum frequency goes down, and your current frequency drops. At the moment it's 0.78 gigahertz. Your turbo boost is switched off. If you were doing something high end and you wanted to use the full capacity, obviously your battery would drain more if you do this, but you can switch it to high performance. And going back up to high performance, you'll see that the minimum frequency is 21%, maximum is 100%, turbo boost is on, and the current frequency has gone up to 2.73 gigahertz. So there are a couple of things that you can do to make the battery life better. It's never going to be the same standard as if you were running Windows on this, because there hasn't been enough application of battery management within Fedora, but Linux in general, to improve this situation, unfortunately. So that's something you need to consider if that's a problem with you. It's not a problem for me, because most of the time I'm at a desk and I've got a plug socket just down the wall. But something to consider. Okay, so those two things there are the bad bits. it's all good from here on in. So if those are a problem, then stop watching now, because there's no point in you going on. This is not for you. If they're not a problem, or you can live with them, then carry on, and I'll show you all of the things I did to make the desktop look like this, and to carry on working with the way I've been working for the last 4 months. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the tweak tool. Now the tweak tool should be installed, should be as part of the core Fedora package, or for any distribution that uses Gnome. The tweak tool is very important. So the first thing you should do is install the tweak tool. Now you can install the tweak tool by going into the software management tool on here, or use DNF. DNF is the new version of Yum, which is on Fedora 25 and 26 and beyond. So it's probably wise to get used to this now. There are some aliases between Yum and DNF, but by and large use DNF instead of Yum. So DNF install, DNF search and stuff like that. So you can either use the software management tool that's in Fedora, or you can use DNF, but install tweak tool. Now tweak tool here, if you can see on the screen, gives you a whole array of extra options to configure your screen and to configure the system. The first tab down the side is the appearance. Now the appearance, this is the general look and feel of the windows and everything, and this shows you how I've got started by choosing the appearance, and this is how I've got into this look and feel. So you can see that I've chosen a theme. Again, you can install this via the software management tool. The shell theme I'm using is OS X Arc Shadow, so no prizes for guessing where that's based. It's based on an Apple theme. And then I choose the GTK Plus theme of OS X Arc Darker. The icons of the Oxygen package, and the cursor is Adwaita, and that's the default package. And I'm enabling animations. I haven't switched the dock theme on, so that's off. So that's the first thing. That gives you the general look and feel. Once you start using those, you'll see how I'll just change some here. So you see, this is the general look and feel. If we want to change it to white, you'll see some changes around here. Let's see, go with something else. But you'll see there's a general change in, you can change these various things on here. But you'll see there's a general change in what's happening, and this gives you the general look and feel changes that you'll need to go forward. There's some desktop changes which I haven't touched any of these on this the next tab down. Not touched any of those. The extensions, there's lots of extensions. I'm going to go through the extensions that I think are important after this. So we'll just concentrate on the tweak tool for now. But there's lots in there. Some of them I've got installed, but I'm not really using them. But there are some that I think are really handy to have. The fonts by and large are all free sans regular. So for window titles, interface, and documents, they're all free sans regular. For my monospace, I've got the Liberation mono regular. So there's 0.10 for the regular free sans, and 11 for the monospace. The hinting is full, the anti-aliasing is at RGBA, and the scaling factor is 1. Haven't really done anything with the keyboard and mouse. The power, there isn't many power options here. This is just what to do when you suspend or hibernate or do nothing when you pull the lid down, and whether you have an option for whether you suspend when the lid is closed. Sorry, there's a suspend. The options here are hibernate, nothing, and suspend when you press the power button. And then the other option here, the toggle switch, is for when the laptop lid is closed. What does it do? I said don't suspend. I don't want it to suspend because I have a monitor plugged in sometimes, and I want to close the lid. Startup applications. fairly self-explanatory. Any applications you want to run when you start the machine, put in here. I've got Slack and Google Hangouts. The top bar, very simple touch switch in here, so you can show the application menu up here. As you can see in this area here, you'll see the application menu that pops up, and there's obviously the clock in here that shows the date, time, seconds. There's also a show week numbers, but I've never got that to work. Typing gives you lots of options about what key combinations to use. But the important things are down here, the last two here. The first one, if you're on the XPS, which we obviously are, because of its high definition screen, its ultra high definition screen, you'll need to switch the high DPI option to 2 for the window scaling. Now, this has an effect on some applications. Some applications can't handle this, and what you'll get is very, very tiny small icons. There's no real thing. There's nothing really we can do about that. It's the application itself. Now, if they're open source applications, you could try and suggest that they might want to try and look at this. But some applications are really good, and they all show the right DPI size and of everything. But some applications will actually show really, really tiny icons, and that could be a problem. It means that for some of the applications I've been choosing, I've had to choose something else, an alternative, just to work on this 4K screen. And the last tab is Workspaces, and Workspaces is to do with the virtual desktops and how they appear. You'll see in the bottom hand of the corner there is a 1 of 2. That means that shows you there is I'm on the first virtual workspace of 2, or virtual desktop of 2. I also have that up here, which shows you I'm on the first one. You can flick between the virtual workspaces by doing a 4-finger swipe up on the trackpad, or swipe down. So that's desktop 2, that's desktop 1. If you can create more. If you put more applications on different desktops, you can just flick through them by swiping up and down with 4 fingers. If you're familiar with MacBooks, it's the right-left swipe operation, but for this, it's the up-down operation with the 4 fingers. And that's the tweak tool, something that you will definitely need to install the very first thing you do, actually, after we've set up everything else that I've discussed so far. So now we've done that, we can go on with the other Gnome extensions. Okay, so this is kind of going to be the last part of part 2 of the review. And this is all to do with Gnome extensions. And Gnome extensions will work on any distribution who are using Gnome as its desktop manager, and so it'll work with Fedora. Now, I'll show you. I think it's safe to say that Gnome extensions are the easiest way to radically change the way the desktop looks and feels. I've got a lot installed, and I will put a list on the link that I've got on the blog, and I'll put that link in the description. Like I said before, that's what I was going to do with the changes that you need to make to Grub. I'll put all of this stuff on there as well. So you basically have a complete list of all the things that I've done to change mine from a stock vanilla Fedora distribution. So Gnome extensions. Now, like I say, I've got a few already installed, but I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to go through the ones that I feel make the biggest difference to the way I use my computer. Some of them are just like, looks really nice. And some of them are actually useful. So I'm going to go through them all. Now, Gnome extensions are, you can find these in 2 places. The universal way is to go to the Gnome extensions website, and there's a plugin for Firefox and also Chromium, and you can choose it from a big list of all of the extensions. Choose to install it, and it will automatically install it on your machine. that you're running from, and you can manage it from there. You can update them from there. And as you can see on the screen here, this is the Gnome extensions page for this is a list of all of them, and you've got like up to 87 different pages, and you can filter them. And you can add your own, but these are the ones that are installed on my machine. So you go through the tab, the extensions tab, you find the ones you want, you install them on your machine, they become on the installed extensions tab on the browser, and you can reconfigure them from here. You can remove them from here, switch them off, or you'll get a little notification if they need updating, because like most pieces of software, they get updated. So you can see them all here, but you can also see them in the tweak tool. Now I'll just minimize that, maximize the tweak tool, and you can see the big list of all of the ones I've got on here already installed. Now, like I say, there's lots of different ones. Some of them are very small little things, just little subtle changes. Some of them are big changes. So I'm going to go through 4 of the ones where I think help me quite a bit during my day-to-day use of the system. The first one I'm going to do is the applications menu. Now, the way they expect you to find applications on something like on a GNOME-based system in the latest version of GNOME is to use the search tool. Now, on the XPS there is the little search finder magnifying icon that will bring you into this screen, and you're supposed to just in the search tool say if I want Firefox, you're supposed to type Firefox, and there becomes Firefox. You click on that, start that off. If I wanted the tweak tool, I would have found it on here, and there's a fonts tweak tool and a general tweak tool, which we're using in this one. But that doesn't sound easy for me. I'm old school. I like things with a menu and a list of applications. So going back to the extension, we have the applications menu. Now the applications menu makes this appear up in the top left-hand corner, and it allows you to have a list of all of the applications stored on your machine, installed on your machine. It also, if you've got Chromium installed, because Firefox is default with Fedora, but you can install Chromium as well. That's a fairly simple process. You also, when you've got Chromium apps, they get all listed on here, which is really good because that means you can put them in a dock for use as almost like a native app. So that's quite cool. To get this applications list up here from the top left, you need to install the applications menu. And again, you do that from the GNOME page I showed earlier. There is a dash to dock. Now, this is the greatest single thing to make your GNOME desktop look like an OS X Apple machine, and that's this. Down the right hand side there's this Apple like dock, and dash to dock is that particular extension which installs that. If you go into the settings, the configuration settings, you'll see virtually unlimited amount of different configurations for instance where you can put the position on screen. So I've got it on the top, on the right hand side of the screen down here, but I could just do it on the standard down the bottom of the screen. I could put it on the left hand side of the screen or up the top. Obviously I've got other things, other different items around here that precludes me from putting it on the top and the bottom, but that's things that I've configured myself. So I like mine on the right. You can change the size of the dock size limit. So we normally just put that on sort of standard. You can change the size of the icons. You can change the behavior and the appearance. The appearance, you can go all sorts of things. You can have the option to customize opacity or make it opaque. So if by changing that up to 100, you can see that the right hand, it becomes just a solid blue. You can go back, So it's almost entirely, there's no differentiation between the background and the actual dock. All those options, there's, you just have to play around with it. You can switch off the dash color. You can customize the dash color so the dash becomes the default, which is like an opaque black color. Or you can switch it on and you can change what. So that's so if I say select, that's a gray. All those sorts of things. I'm not going to go through them all because it's a void to discovery. I think I'll need that, make that a little bit more opaque now. Go back that way and a little bit more. Yeah, cool. So that is the single biggest change from the way the vanilla Gnome desktop works. By putting that on, if you're using Mac for sort of like a professional capacity and you want to use this, it's much easier to work out to switch between the two platforms. Another good thing here is if you have an application running, which I have, like Firefox, you can see it automatically goes off the side of the screen, and only when you move the cursor over there does it flick back. You can do all that sort of thing. So if I flip to the new screen, so this is the second virtual desktop, you can see it's there. On the first virtual desktop, because I've got an application which is in the foreground, the dock disappears. All good stuff. So that's the dock. So we've done the applications menu, which is this up here. We've done the dock, which is on the right. The third thing I want to do, is the drop-down terminal. Oh, this is great. This is genuinely a brilliant thing. And obviously, I've got it in the dock. I've got the terminal, standard terminal window, which is, there's no shock or horror about what that is. It's just a terminal window. It's the standard Gnome terminal window, and that's okay for most things. But if you use the drop-down terminal integration, you can configure a single key press and you get a terminal that drops down from the sky. Watch this. So I've got it on the back tick or the pipe key. I've got a terminal that if I press it, I get a terminal that comes from there. And if I press it again, it disappears. That is really, really handy. It's really useful. I mean, I don't need to explain to you why that's useful. Just to be able to go like that with a terminal is great. Some things I'll still use the main terminal window. If I'm using Vim, it's probably better to have a full screen editing. That's fine. I'll use that. But for little, if I just want to like shut the machine down or do a DNF update, so if I want to do a sudo, again, don't tell me about sudo. I don't need to know that. But I can do a DNF update, say, and I don't have to go into the big window. See, there's always things with Fedora 26. There are always things that you need to update because it's on such that stream of like cutting edge stream of packages. So we can do an update from there, and there's not that many, hopefully. There's some kernel updates, so this should be interesting. But yeah, but it's so handy to have that little drop down. Oh, I just need to run something now. There you go, all done. And already I'm wishing that I hadn't ticked that because it takes a while to do that. But while it's doing it, you can just flip it out. It's still doing it in the background, and flip it back. So that's the third most. That's one of the most useful things that I've come across. One of the most useful extensions. So that's pretty good. And the fourth and final one, the useful extension that I'm going to show you is the places status. So the places is another one next to the applications, and that is all of your home directories. So in your home directory, you have things like documents and music and videos. That just pops that up here, and that's quite useful. It also means that if you can log on to your Google Drive using this method here, and this is my email address. You'll know it. It's it's not I don't need to obfuscate it. It's available everywhere. But that's my Google login, so I can get my Google Drive stuff, and that's quite useful down there. And that's the to get that up there is the places status. Where is it? Places status indicator. There's no additional configuration for this one. It's just you switch it on and it goes up to the top left-hand corner. So that's kind of a whiz through. I'll just show you how this is getting on. Oh, it's all done. I'll say a whiz through some of the extensions that I use regularly. I already touched earlier on about the CPU power management tool, which is up here in the and it gives you the option to switch between the different power management for the CPU. And I've also got an app for weather, and I've got various other things that are up here. But those are the main ones. Those are the main ones that I think that would be really useful for you if you're doing anything technical, developing or running Docker containers or anything like that. It's always nice to have those things. And obviously there's a few nice just swish little design things. I mean, opacity is just brilliant. More opacity on everything, I think, is the mantra that I have at the moment. So that is it. Now that is my second part of the review. Now I was just thinking when I was doing this last bit, and I thought, is there any other things that I can talk about? And there's only one other thing that I can talk about, and I'll do this while I'm doing the screencast so you can see it. Let me just minimize this out of the way. On the XPS and most modern machines now, you have certain preset functions on the function keys for things like volume and mute and fast forward and play and switching your brightness and stuff. And they all work, or at least they all did work until I think it was the last firmware update from Dell. And also, by the way, firmware updates, I was worried in part one that I would need a Windows partition, but then I found out I could just do it on a USB stick and plug it in and update the firmware now. Don't even need to bother about that. It does firmware updates automatically within the software manager on Gnome. So it just says there's a new firmware update, you just double click it, it installs it, and then you reboot your machine and it does the full firmware upgrade. That's brilliant. Don't even have to put things on a USB stick. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, so all of these function keys, so for instance, there's the mute key, the volume, that all works, as do the fast forward keys, although I've got nothing playing at the moment, so that the Windows search, the search key operates the software installation tool, which is what I showed you a few minutes ago. But the brightness, now the brightness did work. So you've got a brightness tool. So that's supposed to be at minimum brightness, and that's supposed to be at maximum brightness. There's some issue here where the last firmware change, and I believe it was the last firmware change, it stops the brightness from being altered on the actual machine. So I've had to go in and actually do it within Linux. So that's a bit of an issue, but it was working in 25. It was working in Fedora 25 and it was working in Fedora 26. And I'm pretty sure it was when the last Dell firmware update came out that stopped working. I can't be sure. So I'm interested if you do have an XPS. I'd be interested if you have the same type of thing that I'm seeing there. Was working for months. I did an update. I did a multiple updates at the same time. So I did a kernel update and I did a firmware upgrade. So I'm not quite sure which one broke that bit, but you still can do it, but it's a little bit more complicated now. You can't do it with the button. So that's interesting. But other than that, it's fine. It's a great machine, and I think it's about time that I do a full summary and let you get on with your life. So that is the end of part 2 of my review of the Dell XPS 9560 and how good it is at running Linux. Well, to sum up, it's really quite good. I'm enjoying using it. I've been using it for over 4 months now, and it's powerful. It does everything I ask of it, and I've got no regrets purchasing it. I do have a couple of little problems about it though. I think I already said that the kernel and the Nouveau NVIDIA, open source NVIDIA drivers, they don't work particularly well together, especially with Wayland. But I've got a link, and I've already said this, there's a link in the description which takes you to a blog article on my site to fix all of the problems that I've had, and also to tell you how to install all of the bits of extras that get you to make it looking into a really nice desktop. The battery is the main problem, I think. Personally, I would like to have lasted well into 4 hours, but to be honest, I bought this for kind of a desktop replacement workstation, and majority of the time I'm going to be using it on a desk, well within the distance to a plug socket. So battery really isn't going to be a problem. If you are going to regularly take this on the move, then I'd probably advise you to get something like the XPS 13, which is it's a lot lighter. Obviously you've got a smaller screen, but the battery would probably be better in that. This has got the full 4K UHD screen, and when that's on battery, and this is down to the fact that Linux battery management isn't great because they haven't spent as much time on it as somebody like Apple or Windows have done. So that's one downside. I think other downsides, the speakers are not brilliant, but they're okay. And most of the time I have headphones on, so not really a problem for me, might be for you. The built-in 720p camera is a bit old hat now. I'd expect at least a 1080p. But again, I've already got a separate USB 1080p camera, so it doesn't bother me that much. Other than that, we are starting to pick small things here because the rest of it is really quite good, and I've got no complaints. As I said, it's performing really well. It does really difficult tasks quite quickly. Yeah, the fans kick in. You can really hear it when you're rendering things or that type of memory heavy processing. But it does it really quickly, and I've got no problem with it. So in summation, if you're looking for the perfect Linux laptop, the XPS 15 9560 from Dell might very well be it. Now, if you've liked this, and I did say in part 1 that there might be a part 3, and if you've got any questions, I will answer those in part 3. If you haven't got any questions, then that's fine. You'll only get these 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. But if you do have further questions about the operation, anything from in the next couple of months that I see as questions on the part 1 video or this part 2 video, might consider doing a response and answer some of these things. So keep adding the questions, and if you haven't already, like and subscribe. That would be great. So thank you very much for watching, and I do appreciate your feedback, and I'll see you in the next video.